It's winter still, despite spring on the calendar. Joining us today is Ian Sainsbury. Hey, tell us a little bit about where you are.
Well, I'm on the border of Norfolk and Suffolk in the UK, and it's a lovely part of the world. It's a quiet part of the world, Craig, which I sometimes wondered maybe I should be living nearer the action in London. But in the last few weeks, I've been quite glad of the fact that I can walk out my door and 5 minutes later be, next to the water or in amongst the trees, and quite easy to keep 2 meters distance between me and my neighbours. So it's it's starting to look like a wise decision in hindsight.
Good to go. So you kind of live in Midsummer.
Do you know, I haven't seen the film yet. It's lined up for me. I love a good horror film, but the problem with this whole isolation thing. I'm here with a family. I'm the only one who likes horror films. What am I supposed to do?
Not watch them?
Well, yeah, or sneak down at 2 a.m. and I don't know. But I really want to see it because isn't that from the, who was it? Hereditary? Is it the same director?
I'm not sure.
I can't remember what the first one was, but I really fancy it. It looks like it'd be right up my street. Anywhere near the Wicker Man, I'm happy.
Good to go. Okay, we have folks coming online now, so that we use the small talk at the beginning just to get stuff rolling and make sure that the YouTube catches up, because YouTube starts sometimes very bizarre entry point. Okay, so talking with Ian, how long have you been writing, Ian, and how many books do you have out?
Well, I got started at the end of 2015 and published the first book in March 2016, and that was The World War. So I now have nine books out. The 10th one is done. In fact, I had the final proof copy come through yesterday, and that's an Audible original. And there are 2 drafts on the go for thrillers. The first one will be done at the current rate, because there's a lot of time to write at the moment, Craig. I don't know if you've noticed. So I think another 2 weeks, and that should be the end of that draft.
That's great to see. That's great. And last year, I mean, you popped to the top of the charts because first you look like Mark Dawson and sound like him, and second because you won a prestigious award, a Kindle award.
Yeah, that was a bit of a shock, a nice one, but it was open to books in the English language, and you just had to, if you published between, I think it was March and June in the year, when you come to put in your keywords, if you put in Kindle Storyteller Award or Kindle Storyteller 2019, I think it was, then you automatically got entered. But it's the kind of competition where I knew about it, and I was struggling to find my 7th keyword, and I thought, there you go, I'll put it in for the award, and you just forget all about it.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I looked at the page when it was coming up to the time when they're going to announce a shortlist, and they have a dedicated storyteller page, and there were 9,000 entries on there. So at that stage, I just thought that that's the odds are so stacked against anybody. But there you go. Yeah, it happened. Got on the short list, and I still didn't think I was going to win. And I didn't think I was going to win right up until the moment when they said my name. And there's a lovely photograph somewhere online of my wife in tears and my mouth hanging open about this far. If you don't believe me, it's absolutely genuinely shocked. And if you... the Bestseller Experiment podcast was there, and they recorded my speech. And if you want to hear a shocked drunken man stumbling through a speech, it's out there somewhere.
Okay. We're not going to do that right now, but we ask our viewers if you want to take a few minutes to see what happens when somebody drinks too much at the award ceremony that they don't think they're going to win. Then that's it. Ian is the example of how to do that and how to do that well. So what did show us the award you got? I think that's really cool.
Well, in this pile of rubbish on my desk, I got it ready for you. So there you go. Can you see that?
Yep, looks good. Kindle Storyteller, and it sure looks like a Kindle fits right in there.
Well, this is a nice thing. We all got a goodie bag, all the shortlisted authors, and in there was a Kindle Oasis. So, which I I'm an early adopter in this country of Kindles. On Amazon, it'll list your devices when you send a book to your device. This Kindle shows up as Ian's 6th Kindle. So I've
Nice.
mine go all the way back. But this is actually a Kindle holder. So I don't know if they were expecting me to put my new Kindle in here, and then just if I was on public transport, just to subtly hold it up and
the humility award.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've got a special hat now that says award winner, that I wear at parties, just in case anybody doesn't know.
Yeah, just in case. No, that's great. That's great that you were in there, and that was for a thriller, right?
Yeah, and that was my first thriller. It was all sci-fi up to then, and I dabbled in. My 8th book was more fantasy. I think someone described it as a middle-aged Harry Potter, but who doesn't want that?
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
So yeah, what I really should have done is go back to sci-fi, and I did have some ideas for another series, but I had one of those ideas that you can't get out of your head, and they're not always the best ideas, but this one was persistent enough that I thought, I hadn't read anything quite like it. I do read psychological thrillers. I thought, no, I think there's something in this, and I should just get it out of my system and write it. So, in fact, I dictated it. That was the first time I've used dictation software properly. But it felt like it needed it to be spoken. So
how long did it take you then to jam that book and put it together using since you moved to dictation on it?
Well, it definitely upped the word count. I mean, I tend to start a little bit slow because I'm not exactly a pantser, but I don't do a lot of planning. I know where I'm going, and I make notes, but there's nothing too structured. I usually know where it's going to end, although that inevitably changes. So I was probably managing between about 800 and 1,500 words a day for the first week or so, and then it started to take shape, and that was when I moved on to dictating, and then it was 3,500 to 4,000 words a day, which for me is really motoring. I'm back to typing now, and that's 2,300 words a day, and that's my normal pace. It gives me time to think. I'm happy with that. But no, the picture on the fridge was especially as it went on, as it got towards the end, the last third of the book was it's almost as if I wanted to dictate it at the same pace I wanted someone to read it, because it was all about pace, the last third.
Yeah.
There's one particular moment in the story where I knew once you got there, if you're invested in the book up to there, it was really going to grab you. That was the idea, that it'd be very hard to put down from that point.
Yeah, and that's the key to great story, is you hook them and keep them, and they become so invested that not just they'll keep reading, but they can't put it down at that point. They have to finish the story, and especially with the flow and the pacing. So how do you gauge your pacing in a psychological thriller?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think every book I've written, I think of it more as a movie than a book. So I definitely think like a director in that way. I'm sure I'd hate actually directing anything, but when we write a book, we're God, so we can any camera angle we like. It's anything's feasible. So I with the picture on the fridge, it was definitely scene by scene, and I right down to, okay, I'm now looking at this scene from here. I'm following this character into this room. And I think that makes it a lot easier to pace something, because if you're actually seeing it as if it's a movie scene, then when a scene's too long or too short. We've had this conversation. Now I want to see some action. Yeah. And I found that's the way I got the pacing right. And it makes the rewrite of a book a lot easier as well, because you're seeing it all over again, and you can see where the mistakes are, where it seems too short or too long. And of course, the tricks with even just down to the sentence level with pacing, where you can play with longer, stretched out sentences and paragraphs, and go right down to 2 or 3 words, just bang, bang, bang down the page, and just that variation.
That is a critical point that in the book Larry Martin and I wrote on write compelling fiction. That's one of the things we talk about and give a few examples of is long sentences down to short, high impact sentences, going back to descriptive, and you can't keep it all short because then you really rake your reader over the coals if you're too action all the time. I did that with a book, and some people said I had a hard time because my heart never slowed down and I couldn't do that. So pacing is critical. Flow, you get them. It's the sine wave of your book. You go highs, you come through, you go lows where you're setting them up. They come back up, they go down, and at any point, it's like I need to. Man, that was a great scene. What's going to happen next? And now you slow it down, and they're reading, and they're like, I know something's coming up because it's that rhythm that you set, like a rhythm, say Neil Peart drumming kind of rhythm. Then
Rush fan. Okay.
Oh, absolutely, Die Hard. So
I had 2112 when I was about 14 years old. I used to listen to it obsessively. Yeah.
Oh God, you're a young fella. I bought 2112 when it first came out on 8-track.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, because I had a aftermarket 8-track player for my 72 Mustang. Yeah, you're jealous. You're all kinds of jealous.
No, I'm completely jealous. This is the thing with. I even say it in the author's notes at the end of the last book. There's some things that in different cultures, and we share the same language, but we kind of don't share the same language. So
exactly.
In fact, it's no, it's not in the author. It's in a book that hasn't been published yet. But I talk about the use of the word ass and the word arse, and how there's a time and a place for both of them. And sometimes it sounds much better. And you talk about a Mustang 72 and an 8-track, and I'm romanticizing this. I'm thinking, down Highway 1 and all the rest of it. And you have, I'm a musician, and I played the American Songbook, and you get your kicks on Route 66. It doesn't work in this country. Get your kicks on the A66. Doesn't sound right, does it? You've got highways, we've got dual carriageways. It's just not as romantic. Somehow you've romanticized your transport network, whereas ours is the least romantic transport network in the world.
It's functional to some degree. The M25. Who hasn't been on the M25? Oh my God!
Some people have been on it for I think it was an old American couple who ended up on it for about 2 or 3 days. Because they didn't realize it was it's easily done. I've spent a lot of my life on the M25, but it is just a massive circle around London. And I think they came here on holiday, and in the end, they had to ask someone in the police when they pulled into one of the service stations and said, "Look, we can't find our way to wherever they were going," and then found out they'd just been circling London for 3 days.
Yeah, that's not surprising. Not surprising. Because first, if they came from America, they're driving on the wrong side of the road, so they're just not used to seeing things.
To deal with.
Yep. We got all these other concerns. Yeah. Your psychological thriller. You said you're thinking about getting back into sci-fi.
I was thinking about getting back into sci-fi, but the thing is, when someone chucks you an award, and then your book goes out into the top 10, and it didn't get to number 1, Craig. It got to number. Would you like to know who kept me off the top spot? There was one book ahead of me.
J.D. Kirk.
Oh, you're close.
L.J. Ross.
Yes, there you go. I knew you'd get it. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, I sent her a message on Facebook and made some threats, but no, she stayed there.
Like raise your price to obscene levels, please, just for a day. Just for a day.
Well, I mean, just friendly gesture, but no.
Yeah, I saw that Mark's latest hit number 6 overall on the book charts, and with like 6,000 sales in I don't remember if it was a day or the week, but the top book was 16,000. I mean, the difference between those numbers as you climb are rather significant. So it's like, oh, hey, you only need 5 more spots. Yeah, 5 more, but 10,000 more sales. It's a big number, man. It's a really big number.
Number 2 looked good on paper, but no, I was nowhere near Louise. You know what I mean? She
exactly.
Was way out there.
But it also shows that you did really well. You were quite pleased with the rank and the revenue from that, and that was full price, right? $4.99, $6.99.
It was $1.99 UK, so $2.99, and then it went in December when part of the prize, because it's an Amazon competition, part of the prize was KDP running some promotional stuff on it in December. So it went to 99p for the month, and that's when it got to number 2. So yeah, I don't mind tweaking price. I put it back up to $2.99, $3.99 after that, and still knocking around in the top 300 regularly, sometimes back into the top 200. So
you become a huge fan of writing psychological thrillers, is what I hear.
Well, I can recommend it to everybody. Just get out of your genre, the one that you've built your following up in, and just do something totally different. And it's all good.
I suspect it's a good book, though, and this is the key thing that we harp on, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you in, was the requirement to write a good quality story. You've been writing for 4 years now, almost exact same time as me. I started writing full time at the end of 2015 and published my first book in early 2016. And here we are in both writing full time, making a good living. And it still goes back to quality of story. I have a couple series that didn't do well, and I go back and I look at them, and it's like the story just wasn't there. It wasn't complex enough. The flow was off a little bit. The characters weren't as embraceable as some of the other ones. What did you do in your award winner to make your main character relatable for the readers?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I kept the cast quite tight. That was one thing I noticed in psychological thrillers, is you want to bring everything in. I mean, in almost all books, really, you want to focus your attention on just a few characters, but particularly in psychological thrillers, you just create this more claustrophobic, that's a new word, claustrophobic atmosphere. And my main character, Mags, she's in her 40s. She's in a marriage which possibly has problems, or might be a result of trauma she suffered at the birth of her daughter, for which she's still seeing a therapist. So I just set up someone who, on the one hand, seems to have it all, lovely relationship and child, and lives in a great area of North London, has a nice, comfortable middle-class life. But on the other hand, as all of us have, has problems that she has to deal with, and questions that are unanswered. And it's really just revealing enough to keep people invested in her and make her believable. But also, it's got to be enough so that as she discovers things, we really care. And if we think she's going off on the wrong track, we feel jeopardy, and we want to shout into the book, onto the screen if it's on TV, no, don't go and ask him that. This is a good idea. That's what I'm going for.
Is she in every scene?
No, she's not. That side of the story, yes, everything's seen through her point of view, but I also have a present tense first person character who, this is not giving anything away, who is a killer, who's in America, and we go across to him and backwards and forwards, so he gets his that breaks up the story a little bit, and we learn a little bit more about him each time as well. And as with all thrillers that draw our attention and keep us hooked, the idea is that these two things, will just gradually are just going to come in, and where we're going.
Yeah. I refer to that. I'm sure there's a real term, but I refer to that as the Tom Clancy approach, where you have three completely disparate storylines that intertwine, chronologically lined, but intertwine, and then they all blend at the end. And the last 3-4 chapters are everybody from those storylines all consolidating into the final. So it all comes together. It's also, kind of Tale of Two Cities, where you've got all this other stuff going on, and then it all lines at the end. And there's all different kinds of historical books that are books that have been written over time that do that. It's important to keep your readers engaged, and that's part of flow. Because if you, and that's a limitation if you do nothing but first person, is you always see it through this person's eyes. And some books are very, very well suited for that. Others not so much, because the limiting factor of that first person perspective, you don't get that. You don't have the ability to twine because as much. But you mixed first person and third person in one book.
Yeah, you won't find that recommended in many books on writing, but it's because it was. I haven't actually counted up how many words there are in the killer's point of view. But I imagine it probably comes in at around 5,000 to 6,000, so it's less than 10% of the book. So it's almost like a palate cleanser. If you imagine being in the head of a deranged killer, a palate cleanser, then that's how it works. I think first person, I've done it twice now, whole books in first person, and I'd say it's definitely harder. And I'm glad I'd written a few books before I tried it, because you absolutely have to know where you're going, and there's some things you will always come across a point in the story where you think, well, I want to show this thing happening over here, and of course you can't.
Yeah.
And you don't want it to be someone turning up and saying, oh, you'll never guess what happened over there, and then just spilling everything out on the page, because we can all see it as readers, that kind of info dump, exposition stuff. You read it and think, oh yeah, okay, you came across a roadblock and this is your way out of it. So it's finding imaginative ways of getting through that, or avoiding the problem, ideally. The Audible original's first person, so that took more thinking about, more planning, and a bigger rewrite between first and second drafts than normal. But it's the payoff's worth it if you can get it right, and I hope I have.
And I think you probably did, because a lot of people read it and assessed it. You got judged by people because you put it in as an award contest. I've written 4 or 6 books in first person, and I think it's easier in some respect, especially when you're talking certain genres. The 4 books that I wrote in first person were survivalist. So of course that's critical first person, because you can't have a secondary narrative of a bear or some other event in which the main character has to respond to. But I did mix in some third person because I wanted a secondary narrative of a different character, and that did throw a few readers for a loop. And the editor said that it's a little bit clunky, but it works. So I only did that in the first book of that 4-book series that I wrote in first person. It's just understand your genre. There are some genres where it absolutely will not work, and some people insist on making first person. Like, I think superheroes is one you probably don't want to make first person, because it's kind of arrogant thinking of yourself as a superhero and always being right. Better do it third person and let other people say this superhero is right. Much more impactful than God, I'm right all the time. Let me go use my Spidey powers to go do more right. I'm not sure how well that would work.
No, but actually the other first person book I wrote was Children of a Deterrent. There's 2 first person narratives in different times. Just make it hard for yourself. But that's a superhero book, but the superhero is not the main character. So you gradually learn about the superhero through these 2 first person narratives.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's finding ways of telling a story, and you just try and make it your own, don't you? Try and make it fresh. But sometimes you start digging yourself a nice big hole, I think, and you've got to be prepared to just, however many words in, just say, oh, I don't know, maybe it's time to get out and try again and go into third person or whatever. Third person's definitely would be my go-to every time.
Yeah, science fiction begs third person. There's some good sci-fi that's first person. That's really no problem. But just understand where you're going and what you're doing with your story, because just there's a limiting perspective on first. And sometimes you want that. You want those blinders of seeing it through this person's eyes, where they're not getting all the information. And that's sometimes third person omni. You can write yourself into a corner because you're revealing too much stuff by showing, hey, here's the omni panoramic view of my world, that everybody can smell everything, they can taste everything, and they see everything. And then you've reduced your ability to add mystery and suspense in your story. There's a question. We got a question on the screen for you.
Now, Robin, I should tell you that Robin Sarti actually was one of my. I have very few beta readers. I know this is slightly unusual, but Robin was one of them for Picture on the Fridge, and did a fantastic job. And my favorite bit was actually I know this is a bit of a device, I'm totally aware of it, but I did it for the impact. Chapter 1 of A Picture on the Fridge starts near the end of the book and shows a moment of conflict, and then goes back and tells a story leading up to it. And of course, I changed quite a lot by the time I got to the end of the book. And Robin pointed out that almost everything in the first chapter no longer matched with the climax of the book at all, down to some really pretty key elements of it. So I'd like to take this opportunity publicly to say thank you very much, Robin. That was brilliant. She did a great job. What do I do to ensure the characters are sympathetic to readers? Max said, yeah, okay. Well, I just think I'm like all. I imagine there's no writer alive that isn't a massive reader, and I'm no different. I've read all my life, and the books that stay with me are the ones with characters who have flaws. There's nothing interesting about, you just said it about superheroes, Craig. I mean, there's nothing interesting about someone who makes the right choice every time and does the right thing. Yeah, good for you. Why would I want to read about that? Yeah. Let's hear about someone, if they have some kind of power that they've, whatever that might be. Like in my World Walker series, the main character has almost superhuman powers that he gradually learns to use, but he's got his own issues that actually make him struggle to be able to use those properly, and actually being able to use them at all involves his personality almost fracturing under the weight of these powers. I mean, that's much more interesting to me than someone who just goes, well, hey, I can fly.
Yeah.
And and it's the same deal with a psychological thriller. If it wouldn't be a very interesting thriller if a character was just had a lovely life and did the right things and made the right decisions. We need to care about somebody. We have to be able to empathize, and I've made so many bad decisions in my life, and I've got so many flaws that I feel a lot of empathy with a lot of characters. So I could just pick from one of my many flaws and stick it into a character.
We did, I spent over 20 years in the Marine Corps, so I saw the best and worst of humanity, and I work those into my stories. And the best, nobody is ever perfect, and even characters make mistakes. I'm working on Executioner 9 right now, my second most popular series, and it's still, the main character is now working herself where she's starting to make mistakes because she's under a lot of pressure, both time and from above. So it's but these aren't conflicting mistakes where they take her out of character, because she continually reviews, and her team helps bring her back as they highlight those things that hey, this is it looks like you're going off the rails. Let's take a break. Let's do something and keep it going forward. But the pacing, and this is where beta readers, I have 4 is all, and they will double check this to make sure that I get the characters right, that I get the flow right, that I don't leave any threads open that I didn't intend to leave open. because I'll forget stuff like you. Hey, you wrote that great first chapter that then the whole book built up to, and oh, by the way, along the way, the book took a different turn, and now the first chapter is no longer relevant, which was probably easy to rewrite. All you needed to know, oh, geez, yeah, let me go back and fix that.
Yeah, we just need Robin to tell us this is the thing.
And that's the great thing beta readers do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, just going back to something you said earlier about pacing, when we were talking about books being movie-like in their structure and their pacing, there is one thing we can do as authors, of course, that you can't really do in a movie, and that's to it's almost freeze a moment. So you can lead something up to a moment where there's so much is riding on it, and something is about to happen, and it's a fork in the road, and it could be awful, it could be fine, but it's a moment of absolute tension, and then you can just freeze it there, and you can take us somewhere else. If you saw that in a movie, you throw stuff at the screen, but in a book, if you're invested enough in those characters, but I love that sensation that you might have 3 pages where you've been taken out of a situation, and you don't want to flick forward, but you want to get back to it, but you also want to know what this information is here, and this, whether it's a flashback or if it's just a dream or it's another character, but you still want to be there, but you're desperate at the same time to get back. You can't get that from a movie, but we can do it.
And I love the explanation of viewing your book as a director while you're writing it, because that's one of the things that I do as well. And I will rotate through the scene, and look for, well, is there something interesting from this angle or from this angle that helps move the plot forward? Everything must move the plot forward, and or add a subplot that will be interesting that then will help move the plot forward. Because I'm looking for at least a dozen different subplot items to keep the reader's mind engaged while they're going through. So they have to keep reading just to make sure that they keep everything online. But the director's view, think about that. When you shape a scene, look at it from different angles, and write compelling fiction. We talk about that again, about how to look at a scene from different viewpoints, and what happens when you only concentrate on one view within a scene, and how it can warp the reader's perspective of what's going on.
Yeah, and we do have all that control. That's the wonderful thing. But it's a curse as well, and that's when it's not done well, whether it's by yourself and you recognize it in your own writing, or you start to recognize it in other books, and which is also a mixed blessing, because I think every author would say the same, that you don't read in the same way, and sometimes it can spoil a book that you used to like.
Yeah,
you pick it up again, you start to see those flaws, when the pacing isn't right.
Yeah. Oh man, do you ever? What are you reading nowadays?
Well, at the moment I've just finished rereading a book that I remember really intriguing me years ago. It's one of my favorite authors of all time. That's Ian Banks, and he wrote straight fiction as Ian Banks and science fiction as Ian M. Banks. And I once got drunk with him in Norway, but that's another story. But meeting your heroes was actually great for me. He was fantastic, lovely guy. But this book called Transitions is an Ian Banks, not an Ian M. Banks story, but it's got parallel universes and lots of great sci-fi ideas. It feels like I just wonder what the decision-making process was. You were talking about the Tom Clancy idea of having 3 plots coming together. With this one, it's pre-Game of Thrones, but there's about 7 or 8 main characters, and it just flicks between these characters, and it leaves you at the beginning. You are nowhere. You read the first 200 pages going, what? Who? Did what? And why? And sometimes one character is not the character they seem to be. And you're trying to work out sometimes who a character is. You're reading it and not quite sure whether they're one character or another. I feel like he was just being incredibly playful in the book, and he'd earned the right to do that. I haven't earned that right yet, but wouldn't that be great one day just to say, I've got this readership who love what I do. I'm just going to do something. It's right out there. I'm playing with the form, and they'll you've got enough people who love what you do that they'll go with it and say, "Oh, knock yourself out here and have a good time."
Yeah.
I'll stay with you.
I think Terry Pratchett did a fair amount of that as well. Like, hey, let me mess with people even more. And then one thing that I've learned, I'm a big fan of Star Trek, the original series, as well as Firefly. Firefly has 9 main characters, and they each get their time on the screen, their screen time. So those things, even though you can have other characters together, but there's your 9 plots, 9 backstories, or 8 plots, 8 backstories. Star Trek, the original series, you would have the 3 main characters doing main plot stuff, and you would have supporting characters who were also interesting doing things. And it's a good template to use, and yeah. I'm a big fan. I use it in all my stuff. I try to keep 8 main characters at all times in all my stories. So that's one thing I'm going through. Margaret Lashley asked a question about director's view when you write in first person. Instead of having different camera angles, what you have from first person is the 5 senses. So when you're in a scene, you look, is there something that smells, tastes, feels, or sounds that you don't necessarily understand what they mean at the time, but they could be a hint or clue, a suspenseful point for later. So that's how I handle a director's view from first person.
Yeah, you have memory as well. That's
triggered.
Yeah, but what we do, we live a first person life. So when we see something new for the first time, we don't see it as something completely new. We compare it. So we draw on a memory of something. So, this guy reminds me of, that instinctive like or dislike for someone you have when you meet them for the first time, which can be really powerful sometimes, and you don't know why it is. And it's often because they remind you of someone. It could be someone from your childhood, but we can draw attention to that. So we can take a scene through someone's eyes where they feel that instinctive dislike, and we can either drop hints or spell out why that is.
It's more natural to do, actually, because we live a first person life. I mean, that's a great statement, Ian. I mean, we live the first. So put yourself there instead of being in the director's chair on that little harness thing that lifts them up and around the scene. So instead of being on the outside looking at it, you're on the inside living the dream.
Yeah. There are movies that take that kind of limited point of view as well, aren't there? There's one I haven't seen. So this is a really great point I'm making here. And I'm trying to think. It's a guy who wakes up and I think he's been buried alive, and the whole film is him. Is it called Locke? Does anyone know? I don't know. He has a lighter with enough fuel in it to last the film, I guess. And he's so some of it must have been told in flashback or whatever, but it's very deliberately putting you in this tiny space in someone's head, which a film can't do as well as a book can. Yeah. But it's an attempt to do that. I like it when you have a really good director or a great writer play with a form and do something that surprises you. You can always borrow a technique like that Ian Banks one. Like I say, I couldn't pull it off now, but it doesn't mean I can't try and borrow elements of it, as long as it's not too much.
You bet. Nice. Do we have any other questions? This is Ian Sainsbury. How could we not have any questions? More questions. Bring them on. We've been on for 40 minutes is all. In order to cut my bandwidth, I tried to get a hold of GCI, my internet provider, yesterday to up my bandwidth at a bargain rate. Instead of $15 a gig, each one of these shows uses 2 to 3 gigs. So I'm in for $30 to $45 for each show that I do. So I was trying to get I was on with GCI, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, you've reached the residential. You have a business account." Well, yeah, I do have a business account. So you have to call this different number. I called that number, and this is a phone company. So I know the Britons will appreciate this. I'm calling the phone company, and the auto response is, "We're too busy to take your call. Call back later." And they hung up on me.
Yeah, it's the I had to call the IRS not that long ago to do with tax situation with being an author in the UK but being paid by Amazon based in the US. And one of the first things this lovely lady said was, "Could I take a number for you in case we get cut off?" I thought that's what a great idea. I like that, so gave her the number. Went through this call, which I'd waited 20 minutes on hold to get hold of. We spent another 20 minutes on the line, and then the call dropped. And I thought, oh, it's okay. She'll call me back. No, never heard from her again.
There you are. Bob's your uncle. Welcome to the IRS. And this is, they're going to be inundated. The great thing is, thank God, I probably won't get audited for this year because they'll never recover from all these different variations in the new law past 3 months into the last year's tax season. So they will never recover for this. So no, don't cheat on your taxes. But my fear, my concern about getting audited has just lessened greatly. So we do have a few questions.
Right. The indie publishing paradigm. Well, this is an interesting one because I feel like I'm not up to speed with the indie publishing paradigm yet. I think I've been lucky in lots of ways, where I've been, once the book's done, and I've always focused on that. From the first book onwards, it's a story that I want to tell, and I want to do it as well as I can. But then I know the cover's important, so I spent time going backwards and forwards on that. I know the blurb is important, the title's important, and that look inside is important. I just thought when I first put the book up there, the first book, I just remembered how I buy every book before going online. And that was, I go into a bookshop, I'd probably end up walking around the thriller and the sci-fi sections and just eyeing the shelves. And the ones that caught my eye, it's human nature. I would, oh, that's an interesting cover. Look on the back, that sounds interesting. And if I'm still not sure, yeah, okay, I'll look at the first 2 or 3 pages, even down to the first line. And if it's something special, that's it, I'm sold. So all those elements, getting those lined up in place. And I still, I've got so much to learn about indie publishing, and my focus has been on the writing still. But those elements I really try and get right. And if it takes a long back and forth, then that's fine. And I've asked for help, and I've got it. It's a great community out there. To people will always be there to answer your questions, and enough of them so that you start to see which ones keep coming back the same way. And okay, this is something I can learn.
Yeah, and this is, and for the record, I gave Ian an incredibly hard time yesterday on not spending as much time with his own marketing and advertising as he could, because clearly he's got a sensational product, and he's not putting it into anywhere near as many hands as he could, and he's leaving money on the table.
Yeah,
so anyway, I did give Ian a hard time. Now, the important thing that I wanted to emphasize here, and the reason why I didn't, because Ian said, "Oh, geez, I guess you're not going to have me on your show now." I'm like, no, this is a perfect opportunity, because you need to have that story right. It is so critical to have a great story. And it doesn't have to be great written. It just has to be a great story. You can always fix it later, or write the second book better, write a new series, because Ian's superhero sci-fi didn't do anywhere near as well as his psychological thriller. And it took 9 books. He wrote a great book, and 10 books, 11 books. He's got more books in the pipeline, and each one he's focused on this great story, because you never know if the next book is going to be the Kindle Award winner or the number 1. I mean, you were talking about you didn't hit number 1 in the store with it. You hit number 2 with a good number, but the next one could hit number 1. And the next one could hit number 1, even though you release it now, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, when you get your marketing under control. And in addition to Amazon pushing your book, you're also pushing it. You're getting BookBub feature deals. You're getting other features. You're hitting everybody wherever they look for psychological thrillers. And all of a sudden, hey, your LJ Ross is looking up at you.
I'll remind her of that. I'll say, Craig Martelle told me. I'll send her another message on Facebook. I say, stand aside because I've got it on good authority now, and I can point you to a video to watch.
Yeah.
It's time for you to look up at me.
That's like when I sent a note to KF Breen, and she came back with, I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I said, I don't think you know who I am. And I wasn't trying to be arrogant. Like you don't know who I am. It's like, she goes, no, I don't know who you are. I'm like, oh, I run the 20 books 50K group. And so, yeah, it was quite the blow to my ego. So LJ Ross will do exactly the same thing. Who?
But the thing is, she was one of the judges at the Kindle Storyteller Award. So she knows who I am, but she's just not worried about it. And she shouldn't be. She's brilliant. And Mark Dawson was another one of the judges, actually. So it's some good people there. That made it feel all much better,
some people who understand a quality tale. But that's why you're here. So you can always go back and get that money later when you do get marketing, but as long as you don't invest in marketing and invest, I mean the knowledge, you invest the time to get the knowledge to then work your way up on the marketing and advertising to a point where then you're providing a pillar of income in addition to what Amazon is helping you with, because they have recognized that you're a good storyteller. So all of that, and that's one of the reasons why I did want you on, is to talk about that stuff and just say, hey, I know I'm leaving money on the table, but here's why I am doing that right now. Because if you have a great book, you can always sell it. You don't need to sell it right now.
We're so lucky in what we do. This is not fast-moving consumer goods. I reread. I read 2 Dickens books to my youngest daughter recently, and Oliver Twist was one of them, and David Copperfield was the other. And David Copperfield, in my mind, is a far better book, actually. I like Oliver Twist, but David Copperfield's just terrific, and it's a great read now. This is the thing. And you mentioned Tale of Two Cities, one of my favorite books. That will be a great book in 500 years' time.
That's right. That's right. A good book will always be a good book, and I put Easter eggs and stuff in mine. So mine are probably dated for 10, 20 years, but I'd like to think my biggest seller right now is a book that I wrote 4 years ago. So you never know. If you write a good story, you can always sell a good story. So here's a question from Elaine. Do you recommend any books on story?
Yeah, I do. And it's going to come as no surprise because you will have heard of it. Stephen King's On Writing is probably still my favorite. And when you come right down to it in that book, a lot of it's just him talking about his life and how he got into writing and some childhood stuff. But I can read Stephen King on his childhood forever. I've got no problem reading that. But the actual writing advice is only a small part of the book, but it's just golden. It's great. And I love his way of thinking about the process of just sitting down in the chair at the same place every day, and the way you're training. He calls it the boys in the back room. At the moment, I'm keeping up a decent pace because once the dog's been walked, I'm here. The coffee pot's on the desk, and I'm using a Pomodoro timer at the moment to do 25-minute sprints, and it's the same time every day. And so I'm just showing up with the faith and the confidence that the boys in the back room will do their stuff. And we've made the deal, and that keeps happening. And I probably reread On Writing at least once a year, and that section alone, I will often just pick it up off the shelf and just read that section, especially on rewriting. I love the way he tightens up his prose. There's sometimes I'll read a book and I'll get to a sentence and I'll reread that sentence 5-6 times because I think that's just a perfectly crafted sentence. It's just lovely. And Stephen King does that, but he doesn't do it on his first drafts. He does have to go back and tighten, and I do too. I have to.
Have you ever surprised yourself with how the story unfolded as you wrote it?
Every single time.
It's hard not to.
Yeah, and the great thing about that is if you're surprised, the reader will be surprised. And I've always had an idea how the book's going to end, and it's never been quite that. It happened in Picture on the Fridge. There's quite a big element in that about 3/4 of the way through the book, I suddenly realized, this is what's happening. And on another book, the third book of the half hero trilogy, I wrote myself into the proverbial corner. I did a whole chapter taking a character from one place to another and finding out a lot more about it, about 2/3 of the way through the book. And I got to this place meeting these other characters, and I literally stopped that session and went out for a walk and thought, why am I doing this? This is a disaster. I'm going to have to cut the whole chapter. I don't know why she's there. I don't know what she's doing. I'm going to have a big rethink about the whole book. And then I was in the shower the next morning, and it was a like hallelujah chorus. Suddenly realized that I'd foreshadowed this entire element to the book, which I was totally blindsided by. And it worked perfectly. It was incredible. And I had no idea. So it's a subconscious.
Yep.
So I know that sounds a bit woo-woo and magic, but there is a little bit of woo-woo and magic in writing, I think.
Well, because your story is in your mind. It's all there. You wouldn't go on this sidetrack. I mean, some people do. They find something interesting, and it doesn't move the plot forward. I suspect every one of your sidetracks still moves the plot forward because you've got this. I relate it to a superhighway. You're on the superhighway, and there's exits and stuff, but you always get back on. You're always looking down the road to see what's ahead, and that it's a good thing. So what do you do to push through when you hit a block? And I'll tell you personally, I have to write. I have to sit down and keep jamming, even if it's only 500 words in a day, and get those words. I can go back and edit later or just delete stuff. But getting and resetting things up and reshaping, it's like the scenery designers in between scenes on a live play. The curtain drops and they're working like crazy behind. Hey, let's set this up. Let's move this over here. And then, so when the curtain picks up again, it's like, okay, here's what's going on next. And then other times I'll just move ahead and grab an interesting scene and write that because it's all in my mind. Hey, jam it real quick. Like this morning, in the 45 minutes before I'm like, I better send Ian a note. I jammed 1,300 words on my current story. Because like, oh, hey, nice. let me finish this scene, and it went very, very well and flowed very smoothly. And it's nice getting 1,300 words in 45 minutes. So I was there. It was. I mean, get it done. We don't. Since we're all trapped at home, I would say please do not sit and wait for inspiration. You have to do the work. And Ian just mentioned that himself. I sit down with my coffee. You called it the coffee. I say coffee cup or coffee mug. You called it like the coffee.
Well, I have a whole pot. I mean, I have it like a double thermos pot of coffee. It holds about 3 large mugs of black coffee, and that lives on the desk at the beginning. You are the envy
of all of us.
Oh, it's a wonderful thing. It is, and it's I live on that stuff. That's my. I can almost taste it. It's nothing quite as good as a first sip of coffee in the morning, and you just
indeed.
It's brain into gear, isn't it? It's all habit forming, and I associate that with writing. So it's everything helps.
The benefit of being home. I was trapped in a hotel for 16 days up until last week, and the benefit of being home is I can get up every 30 minutes and go walk around my house. We have a fairly it's all on one floor, so we can take a pretty healthy walk inside the house. Plus, we live on beautiful property of about 12 acres, so we can go out and walk and do other stuff and get that exercise. It is critical to get your ass out of the chair at regular intervals, so you don't blood doesn't pool in your legs and get away from your brain. You need that oxygen flowing. You need the heart to pump every now and then. As I found out, pumping at a high rate all the time is not good. That's actually an issue that a surgeon had to take care of. So we after that, now we're in a better place, and that's the way to go.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got very little to add to what you said about the whole getting bogged down thing, and actually getting out of your chair is part of that. I mean, never mind just for your own general well-being. I would say the actual ideas that move a story forward never come, or very. I can't think of any time when those ideas have come when I've been writing. It's always been when I've been out walking or in the shower. I mean, I did think about putting some kind of waterproof desk in the shower, because it seems like every time I'm in there, there's something. Oh yeah, of course, I need to do this, and then I just have to remember. There's something about the magical properties of water, especially if you go for a walk and then get in the shower. Maybe that's it.
Here's the secret to that, Ian. I have an Apple Watch, and I have the dictation app on my watch. So and it's waterproof because it's an Apple Watch 5 that the admin team bought for me and gave to me at 20 Books Vegas last year. So thank you again, admin team. I have my it's a memo thing. You can tap it, and then you just tell it what you want it to know, and then it'll transfer over to your phone. And Bob is your uncle. Apple Watch 5. Stick a crowbar in your wallet, Ian, and go buy one.
You can explain this to my wife, Craig. Yeah, Ian has to have an Apple Watch, and this is why.
It's a critical productivity tool.
Well, I'm an Apple fanboy. Because I'm a musician, so I'd already made that leap a long time ago. I've got lots of software that works best on Mac. So yeah, you might have sold me. Oh no.
Now here's a good question, and as this is, do you count your editing time as if you're writing time?
That's interesting because the Bestseller Experiment, which is a podcast I've listened to for the last couple of years. They've currently got this thing going where they're trying to encourage people to write 200 words a day. Because if you do that by the end of a year, you've got a novel. That's a great way of kickstarting someone into writing. And that question has come up already. I've noticed that. And I'd say yes, really. If that's what you want, if you're counting, I want to do a certain amount of hours writing, of course, then editing is writing. For me, you could call editing rewriting. There's nothing quite as satisfying as taking a paragraph that almost says what you want it to say, but doesn't quite, and then turning it into 2 sentences that does say what you want to say and says it really well. That's, yes, part of the process. Yeah, I would count it.
That's like just your opinion, man. So yeah, Ian's wrong.
Ian's right.
There we go. I love guests who argue with me. I do not, because those new words, the 200 words a day, if you write them at the end of the year, you have a novel. Not if you keep rewriting. And this is a trap that many authors fall into, is they get paralyzed by that pursuit of perfection, because we all start writing because, hey man, we read a great story and we want to write that great story right alongside. Your first book is not going to be as good as your favorite book, which could be what somebody's 100th book. So understand that the pursuit of perfection and constantly rewriting a book is not adding new words. So editing time is critical. You have to reread your words. You have to make sure. I edit as I go, so I'll go back and reread what I've written, and then move forward from there. But you still have to get XX new words on a regular schedule. Some people write 5 days a week. That's perfectly fine, whatever your schedule is, because new words are not edited words, because you can't edit. You can edit the same 200 words over and over, and at the end of the week, you still have only 200 words, as opposed to 1,400 words. And oh, by the way, I spent an hour editing, rewriting, tightening, like Stephen King. So I would say, in your mind, separate the two. Do not consider editing as writing time. Put on your editor hat, because you need to be more critical when editing than when writing. When writing, you just need to get the story down. And then, because then you can take that director's view and start adding in other things. So that's why Ian's wrong and Craig is right.
Well, we're both right, Craig. And as you were saying that, I realized we don't disagree at all, actually. What you're saying about the editing bit as you're going, I don't do that. I'll read through what I wrote yesterday, and I will occasionally just tighten something ever so slightly, but it's more for sense, where I think I haven't quite got the sense of that, and I want to be clear. Yeah. But then I'm talking about 10 minutes, and then I'm into writing again. And yeah, you've got to, when you're on the creative side, you've just got to let everything come out, and you can't have your editing hat on. But I would say as much satisfaction, although it's a different kind of satisfaction from the rewrite. But it's a different time. It's not the same. The writing time in the morning is one thing. The editing time is another thing, and I don't do that properly until the book's done, the story's told, and I've got 80,000 words to play with instead of 2 chapters that I've rewritten 300 times. And you see that a lot published.
And your beta reader told you to rewrite something, and you did.
Well, exactly. Yeah. You find agents say this a lot, that when they run those workshops where people turn up with books when they're trying to get trad deals, and they'll run a workshop 2 years apart, and they'll see the same people come back with the same book, having rewritten it. Well, 2 years for us is a lifetime, you think. Write another book, and then write another book, and then write another book, because you're going to get better. So
there's magic in practice. I played a lot of golf, and you know what? You can't hit a consistent shot if you don't practice that same shot over and over and over. So we'll end on a golf note, because we're talking into the UK. Do you play, Ian?
I don't play. It's who was it who said it's a good walk ruined?
You're completely like Mark Dawson. I don't think he plays either. So shout out to Mark. When we if we ever get to Cabo for the Cabo private retreat, Mark he's going golfing, and because I love golf, and we're going to go play golf, and so we'll see. It might be a perfectly good golf cart ride, because my heart and lungs it ruins the walk because it's too much like work. But a perfectly good golf cart ride in a scenic area and smacking that ball around a little bit.
Yeah, it seems a shame to ruin it by smacking the ball around, really,
But it's practice, just like writing. And if writing is your profession and you want to make a full-time living at it, don't expect to write, an hour every other day and make a full-time living if you're not going to put in full-time hours. So 2,000 hours a year is a full-time job, and you can make more at that working less. But you're not going to do well against those people who are putting in the time and dedicated, getting the story right, getting the marketing right, getting extra influence from the outside, like an Amazon Prime deal, if you can get one of those. And to get one of those, it takes a good story that sells well. So chicken and the egg. Well, you know what? The egg has to come first, because you need to hatch that great story and start getting some traction before anybody will see you and give you a hand. So that's where we are. We're going to end up 62 minutes. Thank you, Ian Sainsbury, coming to you live from Midsummer Murders, capital of the world.
It's good to see you, Craig.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate your candor, appreciate your conversation, talk about story. I'm a big fan of a great story. It really makes all the difference. And then getting the work done. So how many hours a day are you working?
Writing, actually sitting at a desk writing is, I would say, 3 to 5 hours a day. Depends on, because I'll sit here till I get them done. And in my head, it's 2,000 words is a reasonable day. But then I always try and add 10 to 15% to that, because I think if there's a day I can't write, or that I just feel like it's really not happening, I've built up a little cushion psychologically where I can say, well, I've in the last 10 days, I wrote another 3,000 words. So, okay, you can have the rest of this day off. Cut myself some slack. But then the rest of the time I think when you're immersed in a book, there's no downtime really. As my wife will happily tell you, when she's explained something to me for the 5th time and I'm still going like this. Oh yeah, that guy could come in here.
Aren't you listening to me? That's a funny way to start a conversation, honey.
Yeah. Now you've sold me an Apple Watch. I mean, you're going to be really unpopular with my wife.
Yeah. But you need it.
I think I do.
Not want, need.
Yeah,
this is a productivity tool. Yeah. Yep, that's right. Write it off. No, great, Anya. I appreciate that. And you have a great day, Ian, and everybody out there. Have a great day. Think good thoughts. Be kind, and we will see you tomorrow.
Cheers.